Welcome to episode 94 of the Camerosity Podcast, the world's #1 open source film and digital photography podcast. My name is Mike Ekman, and it's that time again for another exciting episode. Way back in July 2022, we recorded episode 30, which we called our Camera Store episode. On that show, we welcomed current and former Camera Store employees to share with us their stories of what it was like to work in a retail camera store both before, during, and after the rise of the digital revolution. As we are all aware, many camera stores didn't survive, but of the ones that did, we found out what changes they made to adapt to selling cameras today. It has been almost 3 years, so we thought we'd do it again. For episode 94, we welcome Meredith and Corey from Roberts Camera in Indianapolis, Indiana. If you're not familiar with Roberts, you probably know them by their used camera division, UsedPhotoPro, which sells a great deal of vintage equipment on eBay. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hey Mike, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, Mike.
In addition to Roberts, we welcome another fan favorite, Zeb from Blue Moon Camera and Machine in Portland, Oregon. Blue Moon is known not only for their retail and online selection of vintage cameras, but they also service and sell vintage typewriters. Welcome to the show, Zeb.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
In addition to Roberts and Blue Moon, two of our very own hosts are former Camera Store employees. Paul from Fairborn Camera in Fairborn, Ohio, and Stephen from Camtech Photographic Services in Hamilton, Ontario. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And although he has never worked in a camera store, he's certainly familiar with how they work, is Theo Panagopoulos. Hey, Theo.
I can tell you all about how to buy things from camera stores, and that's the extent of my expertise here.
All right, I can see we have a lot of guests in the waiting room, so let's hit some buttons and let them in.
Oh, I see a Camerosity shirt in there.
I finally got it, guys. Finally got it up here in Montreal, Canada.
All right. We created a couple Camerosity t-shirts that we printed up for fun with no intention of selling them, but they were in such high demand, we published a link to a place where you could just order them yourself. So a few people have created their own Camerosity podcast swag.
Yeah.
So as promised, this is our second Camera Store episode. Last time we did one was 3 years ago, and we had what I thought was really cool discussions just about what it's like working in a camera store today. What are some of the things that some of these people have done to adapt? We even at the time got into some discussion about like how COVID even affected some camera stores, and we found out that some people really, were able to kind of change and switch to an online model. I remember some people talked about selling kits to like churches and such like that too, for people to do. Something that I want to get into at some point later today is, what kind of impact are some of the newer things that are coming out having? Are you seeing some demand from them, in the retail environment, cameras like the Pentax 1.7, the Rollei 35 autofocus, and, maybe just some of the other projects that you keep hearing about on an almost daily basis. But we have, in no particular order, but since they happen to be on my screen at the top of Zoom, we have Corey and Meredith from Roberts Camera in Indianapolis. And I should be shamed. I feel bad about this because I live in Indiana and I have never been to your store.
What?
Come on.
Here's the problem I have with Indianapolis is always like a pass-through city for me. Every time I'm in this city, I'm always going somewhere else. I'm either going to visit Paul. I have an uncle in Cincinnati. I'm going down to Kentucky, and I need to actually stop and stay in Indianapolis because I know there's some cool things to do. You guys have a great zoo, of course, the Speedway Museum. Although I did go there to see the eclipse, so I do on occasion stay in Indianapolis. But I do need to make it a point to come down and maybe see you guys or see the store. Could you guys just for anybody who's not familiar, just kind of explain who you are and maybe a little history about your store?
Absolutely. Well, yes, you definitely need to stop in and see us. I'm Meredith Reinker with Roberts Camera, and also we have UsedPhotoPro and Roberts Distributors. We are a third generation family-owned business. My grandparents started Roberts in 1957, so we'll be celebrating 68 years this year. My dad ran it for many, many years, and then my husband Corey and I got involved with the business in 2011 and have really seen all sorts of changes since then. So we have one retail store location in downtown Indianapolis, and then we have quite a bit on the e-commerce side of what we do. Corey can tell you a little bit more about UsedPhotoPro. And then we also distribute a lot of analog products, film, chemistry, darkroom supplies to camera stores, amazing camera stores all over the country, including Blue Moon. So we love to be a part of this industry. It's just awesome to see.
I remember when you were a catalog showroom that sold jewelry.
That's why our wedding rings are from.
Yeah.
You did. I bought. I hired a guy from that came from you in 1977. He'd moved from Indianapolis to Springfield, Ohio,
Okay.
and I was at a camera store in Springfield at that time.
Oh my gosh.
But you had a great reputation even back then.
Aw, thank you.
It's terrific to have you with us here tonight, and also we can tell Nelson Coppage stories.
Yes, we
can.
Nelson Coppage, is he still your lead buyer?
He is.
Yes, he is.
Nelson bought from me at my camera store for KEH,
Wow.
and he's one of the nicest, most trustworthy, honest guys I ever dealt with on the road. Just a wonderful guy.
He still exudes all those characters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He and I started UsedPhotoPro together at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012. We met in a hotel room in Vegas at CES and put the idea together.
So what was the motivation to do that, to create sort of a separate like sister company?
Well, a lot of it had to do with what was going on in Nelson's life. He was leaving or had left KEH, and he really wanted to stay in the industry. And he had a great relationship with Meredith's dad, Bruce. And he said, I'd love to work with you sometime. And at the time, we had just moved back from Chicago, and Bruce said, "Hey, Corey, you think you could run this used business?" And I looked at him like a deer in headlights and said, "Of course I can, Bruce." And so Nelson and I and another guy, Phil Wingett, paired up and started UsedPhotoPro with a couple of Excel spreadsheets, and really Nelson's ability and networking partnerships that he had is where we really started to build the brand.
Very cool.
I wanted to say that I bought this XT50 from you guys just 2 weeks ago, and it got here 2 days early. So thank you for that.
Right.
Thank you. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much.
I would be willing to bet a huge number of us have bought stuff either from your store. Clearly not me, the retail store, but I've bought a great deal of things from you guys online. The biggest purchase earlier this year was the Detrola 500 that you guys sold me, which I absolutely love and is still sitting over here on the shelf. But I'd like to switch over to Zeb real quick, because we could sit here and really get lost in just talking Robert stories. But Zeb, it's interesting you're here, and I'm really happy you're here because I'm very aware of your store. I've bought things from you as well online. But in our very last episode, well, 2 episodes ago, actually, we did a show on the Italian camera industry. And one of the cameras we spent quite a bit of time talking about was a Italian SLR called the Rectiflex. And while we were on that show, one of our listeners, Miles Liebeck, started Googling and eBay searching the Rectiflex because he was enamored by it. And he was really getting close to wanting to pull the trigger, but after seeing how expensive they are, he paused. So then the very next show, I asked for an update. I said, "Miles, did you ever end up buying that Rectiflex?" He goes, "Well, I went to my local camera store, which happens to be Blue Moon, and he said that you had one there too." So at least one of our people here today, because I do see Miles in the room, is a frequent visitor of your store. But Zeb, welcome to the show. Maybe give us kind of like a little background about what you do and a little more about Blue Moon.
Where to begin? First off, it's so cool to see Meredith and Corey. As like, how long have we been working with Roberts? And it's like, it's like so much of our film inventory comes from you guys, and just really appreciate that connection. So it's really cool to see you guys here. It's like, so I guess the long short version is Blue Moon opened December 2001. It was kind of the harebrained scheme, passion project of the owner, Jake Shivery. So he still owns the shop. He's still there every day. He had grown up working at other camera stores and decided that he wanted to not work for anybody else again. And he was wandering through a neighborhood in Portland called St. John's and found an old abandoned photo lab that still had an old Copal ML300 printing machine, like mothballed in the abandoned space. And he's like, he said it was like a ray of light. And so Blue Moon opened, December 2001. I happened to wander in there around February of 2002, bought my first film camera from Jake, and then was taking them film now and then. And after a couple of months, he's like, "Hey, you're our best customer. You want a job?" And I was like, let me think about that. He's like, the pay will be lower. There's no benefits, but you get to do what you love. And so, yeah, I thought it out over the weekend, and I came back and said, sure. And it's like, at the time I was in a bit of a transition, and yeah, that was September of 2002. And I've been there ever since.
You briefly touched upon it, but I'm curious to know about your company's name, specifically the "and" machine part. So I'm right in that you guys do a lot of like typewriters and like printing stuff?
Typewriters specifically. And that is courtesy of Jake. So like Jake's other passion outside of analog photography is writing, specifically typing. He does all of his writing via typewriter. And so like, even though from a lot of points of view, it makes absolutely no sense to carry and sell typewriters, we do. Weirdly enough, like a quarter of a mile down the street from us is a father and son business that specializes in the refurbishing of typewriters. And so we buy these machines, we send them down to that fellow, Ace Typewriter. His name's Matt McCormick. If you have a typewriter, he's the man. So yeah, it's like on any given day, we might have like only like 4 to 6 or 7 machines out available. So it's like an incredibly niche part of our inventory, but an absolutely vital one in a certain sense. So yeah, that's the machine part for the most part. Over the years, we've had a couple other odd machines. Like we just sold a stenography machine to a woman who was a court reporter and just getting ready to retire, and had spent the early part of her career typing on one of those machines. And then we've had the occasional Geiger counter too, but mostly it's typewriters.
The fact that there are 2 typewriter places a block apart is the most Portland thing I've ever heard.
It really is, yeah.
I am very fascinated by all types of, antique technology, mechanical devices, but I am thankful though that cameras do occupy less shelf space than typewriters do, because if I was into typewriters, I would need a new house. So I'm quite thankful that cameras are at least easier to display and not quite as large. Thanks, Zeb. And I was curious, you guys obviously both answered it, but I wanted to know if you guys knew each other. So obviously you do. I think that's great. Quick question for Paul. Paul, we were talking, I think the last episode, where you said that there was some kind of link between camera stores who win the PMA Dealer of the Year and then they go out of business. So Is it safe to say that Roberts never won that award?
Roberts never won that.
Which is good. Is good.
And what's interesting is that I worked for 3 guys in the photo industry over 34 years. I worked for one guy for 10 years, the other guy for 24 years. The guy I worked for 10 years was Click Camera in Springfield, Ohio. It was Ed Claben. Ed wanted to be PMA Dealer of the Year so badly. I mean, he really wanted to do it. He politicked for it. He ran a good business, but he never got to be Dealer of the Year. All of his friends, the Inkleys, Bogosian, Ritz, Wolf, Mike Warswick, all of those guys were Dealer of the Year. They all went out of business, except Inkley, I think, is still has at least one store left. Ed just kept his head down after that, and he didn't go out of business. But it was a kiss of death at one point. It was actually a joke. No one really wanted to be Dealer of the Year because they could see the handwriting on the wall. History was not going to be nice to him. But that's just that's just politics. But I have a question for Zeb. Are you slitting Minox film? Did you buy a slitter?
We made one custom. I don't know, like maybe Corey and Meredith, like maybe you guys experience the same thing, but when you run an analog camera store, you tend to attract some of the most interesting customers. And we have a guy who is an ex-blacksmith and mechanical engineer. And so he built us a custom Minox slitter. And yeah, we're slitting down from 120.
Wow, that's so cool.
How do you do that? I mean, I know how you slit it, but where do you wind up with the cartridges?
We get the cartridges from Minox. So like, gosh, how long ago was this? Like, I feel like I'm horrible at gauging how much time's passed. Well, we've been doing this for something like let's just say 10 years, give or take a few. But like we were getting our Minox film from Minox. And then we went through a stretch of like a year or two where the supply from Minox was just really sporadic and just kept getting worse and worse. And we were back ordered for long stretches. And then when the film came in, it was not great quality. I remember like we had some of the film was like actually cut like wavy, and then it just went away. And I can't remember the exact discussions, but we're like, hey, we can do this. And so we reached out to Minox and we're like, hey, we want to do this. And it's like, can you help us? And they said, sure, and they agreed to supply us with all the cartridges and all the cartridge pieces, all the instructions for assembling them. Not that it's terribly difficult. And their only stipulation was that we couldn't call it Minox film because they didn't want customers to confuse it with a product coming from Minox. And so we call it spy film for Minox, because what else do you call it?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like even it's like we still get they still manufacture cartridge parts on order for us. And so we just keep getting the supply from them.
Cool. I knew that you were a great source for it, but I didn't know exactly how you were doing it.
Yeah.
It's terrific.
Minox buys from us now, which is just a weird reversal of roles. So
very meta.
Yeah.
Corey and Meredith sell your film too, I would imagine. Is Minox one of the things that you supply to them?
No.
I don't think it is. Yeah.
No.
We should talk about that at some point.
Yeah, we should.
We sell a lot besides Minox, we sell a lot to Photo Impex in Germany. So like the European market for Minox film is like Photo Impex is ordering from us. It seems like we can barely keep up with their orders. So whatever they're doing, they're selling it really well. We sell some to FPP, Film Photography Project, and then I think some to MS Hobbies. They're in the UK. And
well, if you guys ever create any new lines of film and are looking for a name, a really terrific name for the film could be like Camerosity Film. We already have convenient Kodak-esque colors for our logo. So
there you go.
Before we continue, we have a lot of people in the waiting room. I'm not going to say everybody's name. There's a lot of returning callers. I see Will Pinkham. I see Miles, Larry Effler, Howard's here. Hong Lee. Hong hasn't been on the show in quite some time. Hey, Hong.
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
Good to see you again. Did you have a question for anybody?
Yeah, I did. I had a question about the type of customers that typically go to camera stores. Like, what sort of people do you usually get, and has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I can start at least with our retail. It sounds very cliche, but we get such a huge variety of customers. I mean, we get everyone from the beginner walking in, they just want something a little better than their iPhone. We get professional photographers. We get everything in between. And then in the past, I would say probably 5 years, the growth of the younger demographic that is coming in for film has been really fun and invigorating to see. Most of the people in our store that are coming in that are in the 18 to 24-year-old demographic are, a lot of times coming in for film. And it's, this great, fun, artistic demographic. They like that it's, something tangible. They're excited to develop it, see the prints. So that's been a really great growth market to see. But then just the variety of people we get in is great. Photography spans such a wide market of people and interests and reasons. And now video brings a lot of people in, obviously, as well. So it's really great. Someone said, you get to talk to such interesting customers that are camera customers. And it's just people that are, they're interested in lots of things and they're curious and they're, scientific and smart, and they see the world in wonderful ways. So we really get a great variety of people.
Would you say that the 18, 24-year-olds, that they've kind of expanded your customer base?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just in the products they're looking for, in just the foot traffic. I'm sure Zeb would say the same. They come in, they buy film, and then they come back and they get it developed, and then they come pick it up and they get, it's a great cycle for bringing in walk-in retail traffic to the store.
Do you think that a lot of the younger people are just content with buying a film camera, shooting a couple rolls, and leaving it at that? Or do you see them progressing in their knowledge? Like, do they start off having you develop the film and then they ask, I want to do this on my own, and then maybe they trade up to something more professional? I guess what my question is are you seeing growth from that younger segment into more advanced stuff?
We do in our store. I mean, not every single one, but
Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, you have those that are really captivated by it. They want to try. We try and carry, obviously, being a distributor as well, but carry a really wide variety of films for people to try. If there's something new that comes out, we always want to have it so that people have, different film stocks to try out. But yeah, absolutely. We'll see people that then want to get into 120. So we do see growth with it.
That's interesting. Regarding like Zeb, you mentioned earlier that you also sell typewriters.
Mm-hmm.
That's really fascinating. I work a block away from Central Camera, and they do see a lot of, I've noticed the crowd there skews young. And I talk occasionally with the folks who work there, and they tend to be like the Art Institute kids. And for whatever reason, I mean, obviously they love film, but they love typewriters. They love analog, like cassettes. They love LPs. So this whole idea, like this attraction to analog for people who haven't necessarily grown up with it, to me, it's fascinating. I'm really curious as to like what they gravitate towards and why they like it.
You mentioned vinyl. Portland's a big vinyl city as well. And I'd also echo Meredith, where it's just like, there is a lot of variety. There's a lot of subsets of customers. But I was thinking about your comment, and yeah, we definitely have a lot of customers that are, there are definitely those who are, because they're drawn to like analog film cameras for like the tactile or the analog nature, they're also drawn to vinyl and to typewriters. But like Portland is like another subset that comes to mind is like Portland's a big skateboarding city, and like film's proven to be, kind of popular amongst like the skateboarding community too. And we have a number of our film customers, who are skateboarders and photograph film. And I'm not entirely, I can't speak to what draws them to that, but I was just thinking of that as well.
Do you find that they're drawn to certain types of cameras versus others? I mean, that's always been like one of the mysteries when you look at like the eBay listings, a camera that's relatively not particularly advanced, not particularly capable, like a Canon AE1, it seems to be so expensive. And then you see like extremely capable professional grade cameras like a Nikon F5, and they're roughly the same price. And that's why are people drawn to like things more like the AE1 versus things like the F5?
I would say the internet, social.
Yeah, it's influencers, I think. I mean,
100%.
You go to TikTok and they're digital creators.
Yeah,
have caused that market to go absolutely insane.
We saw this just in the last couple of weeks with the Pentax 1.7. We've stocked that camera for a while now, and we went through a lull where we had 3 or 4 of them in inventory that we hadn't sold one in several months. And then recently there's been some articles posted online about that camera, and we sold out within like a couple of weeks. And not because of anything we did, but just because, it becomes talked about online. And so I think that drives a lot of at least what people come in the door looking for. And then, you wander into a shop like ours where there's, it's like you might look in the case and see a Rectiflex. Now, I mean, obviously no one's just going to pivot to a Rectiflex, but my point is it's like, they may come in sometimes with a target like an A1 or a K1000, and then we expose them to all the other possibilities out there. And then they might leave with one of those cameras.
And I think you'll hear a lot of, people that they want the vintage look of it. There's a very specific look that they're going for. when they're picking out their cameras. I think it's the same, why people are gravitating back towards the old point and shoot cameras. And yeah, we've seen the same with the Pentax 1.7 when Fuji announced that X half, it got all these people interested in half frame photography, and they realized there was a Pentax out there for half the price that was doing that as well.
So obviously one of the most successful brands and exciting ones for collectors is Leica, right? Like we could talk Leica all day long, but is there a lot of demand from younger people for Leicas, or have they priced themselves kind of out of the market? Like, I guess, for someone who is interested in a Olympus stylus Epic, is there an upgrade path where they may end up with like an M3 or a screw mount Leica?
There's definitely a path for that, but it takes a very unique individual.
Okay.
We have, obviously some of our staff started down that path, and then they learn the history of Leica and they just kind of become infatuated with it. I will say that Leicas, especially, some of the M bodies, M3s, they're very difficult to get repaired now. And repairs are rather expensive. So when we purchase them, we find that they might have their shutter speeds are off a little bit, and the cost of the repairs are almost totally in the cameras. So there will be fewer and far between as we kind of lose more and more repair centers, or more repair centers get backed up even more. I mean, it's a 12-week waiting period right now for a lot of
That's
people.
actually short, honestly. Most like Yushin, we talked recently, is up to almost 9 months for a lot of repair work. I want to come back to you guys, but I want to continue to get through the list of people here. We stopped at Hong. I see a name I've never seen before. Betty Ann Cochran, welcome to the show. Are you someone who used to work at a store, or just a eager listener of the podcast?
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the show. You want to introduce yourself?
Betty Ann. I'm in Canada, and I have gone back to film photography after being out of it once I had kids. Carrying the diaper bag and the camera bag and everything else point and shoot seemed a little more practical, but now the kids are gone and I'm retired, I've rediscovered it again.
Very cool. So you're that first group I was talking about. Like you're getting back into the models you remember from before. Do you have any particular ones that you love or you're playing with right now?
Well, I own a Nikon F75 and the F801.
The 801, translate that for me, Paul. Is that the
N8008?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. Yep. That's one of my favorites. I just can never remember the other name for it. So very cool. We're glad to have you. I see Dan Hausman. Dan, welcome back. It's been a while since we've seen you.
Hello.
Dan is a big fan of American cameras. He's also in Ohio, and he runs the Ohio, I always get the name wrong, the Ohio Collectors Camera.
Ohio Camera Collectors Society.
There you go. Okay. I always mix up the words, but I get it right there too. But so if you're into auctions, like in-person auctions, we're talking, Dan's the guy to see in Ohio, but him and I have a shared interest or shared fondness for many of the less common American cameras, like the Ektra and the Bell & Howell Photon, and, some of the less common models there too. I see Brad, and I don't know if that's someone we know. Brad, hey. How you doing?
Hey, yeah, I've been on once before, and I'm around in the Discord. So actually, funny, I am a person who did have that journey from like the cheap crappy camera to the Leica.
Oh, cool.
One of my my first film camera that I bought back in 2010 probably was one of those crappy like lomography toy cameras, I guess I've been lucky in my career path that I can have a couple Leicas now.
But did you know that you would wind up with Leicas when you first bought that lomography, or like how did you get from point A to point Z?
I think it's just as you learn more, right? Like that's like the holy camera, right? But no, I don't think I actually knew I was going to end up with one until pretty shortly before I decided to pull the trigger on one. I was like, I can actually manage this, and it would be really cool. It also helped. I guess I got into M mount through Minolta CLE.
Okay.
And then once I started picking up lenses, then I started getting annoyed like at the frame line compatibility of the CLE. and kind of decided like, yeah, well, yeah, I'll go ahead and pull the trigger.
You could kind of group, I think you could generally group all people who shoot film or are interested in film into one of three broad categories. You got the guys who always shot film. Digital came along and either they never gave up on film, or maybe they did temporarily and want to revisit the models that they used to have. I've talked to so many people who remember when expensive cameras like, maybe, I'm not going to say Leica, but we'll use, for example, the Minolta X700, which was a pretty high spec manual focus SLR from the 80s, that when you were younger, you probably couldn't afford that. These are the people who probably bought an entry level SLR, but they flipped through back of magazine articles and wished that they could have that fancy state of the art SLR. But now that they've become more affordable, they're able to purchase those cameras that they remember from their youth that they could never have. Then you got the middle group, which is me, right? I was born in 1978. I'm 46 years old now. My dad shot film. He had a Canon, I think a T70 growing up. I'm sure I had some variety of 35 millimeter point and shoot cameras. I remember having a Fisher Price 110 camera, but then digital came along. So by the time I really started to shoot photography, I was into digital, and I've gone back into film just because I love it, but I remember both. And then the third general group is just the people who never experienced film at all. You know, the younger people who this is the tactileness of it, the physical, you know, holding something in your hand, getting actual pictures that you've made. And I've always found it fascinating, that third group, and what motivates them and why are they doing this. I'm glad that they're doing it by all means, but I always just, I like hearing people's versions of what got them to be where they're at today, and where do they want to go with it. You know, not everybody wants to be a collector with 900 cameras. Some people are just happy with one or two, but you know,
they're weird. They're weird.
They're weird, yeah, like us.
Yeah.
Says the guy with the big shelf in the background. I don't know if you guys can see mine. Some of us are very weird. So, you know, this podcast tends to lean more towards the collectors because that's pretty much what we are. But, you know, I love hearing the stories of people who are actually using cameras and doing things with them too, because these things were meant to take pictures. And I try to shoot mine as much as I can. Obviously, you can't shoot them all, but it's so much fun to see these things and see how they work. And one of the greatest thrills I get is when I do show people some of the results of some of these old film cameras, and they're always so impressed with the image quality. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, this was what people had for a long time, and they did a pretty nice job of it. So they're still going to work. Is there anybody else here besides Roberts and Blue Moon that used to work at a camera store?
I was in photo retail for 45 years.
I got fired after one day.
After one day, because you just kept playing with them?
You were better off.
The lady who ordered the 50mm macro lens, and she came to pick it up, and I sold her some score-on filters instead for what she needed. I thought they would serve her better, and the camera store owner said, "Yeah, that's not how we operate." So I was a welcome customer, but I was no longer a welcome employee.
So, throwing back a question for Corey and Meredith, since Roberts has been around longer, what would you say are maybe top two changes that you've seen Roberts make from the era of film only to when digital kind of took over, that allowed Roberts to continue, whereas so many other stores didn't?
Just that transition. I mean, the film to digital transition was so huge. I think the biggest thing that I saw my dad do, and that I've seen, you know, the camera stores that, you know, are still really thriving, is, you know, they welcome change. You know, you're not fighting against, nobody's sitting there going, oh, this digital thing's never going to take off, we're not going to get on board. So the film to digital transition was obviously huge, but then also the internet, you know, just getting on board with, people may not walk into my retail store forever, and we have to figure out how to navigate selling online, because that's where people are shopping. And I think that, you know, we had a website very early on, I think like 1997 maybe, which, you know, was pretty early.
That's early.
We actually still have our web designer still has like the mock-up of it. It was something. But I think just being willing to change and embrace that stuff, and not sitting around saying, you know, we're going to do it this way because that's the way we've always done it, but saying,
sure,
hey, we're going to do this differently.
Now, Zeb, you didn't know it at the time. Well, I mean, I know you didn't start Blue Moon, but you were there early on. But at the time, 2001, 2002 probably was one of the worst periods to actually open a camera store because it was like imminent change. So is that something that you remember back then as, holy crap, we need to do something different? Or were you kind of already prepared for it?
You have to come out to Blue Moon sometime and you have to meet Jake to really understand. You know, he's this combination of like having a vision, being completely convinced that his vision is correct, and being too stubborn to change it. Because yeah, you know, it was the worst possible time to be like, okay, I'm going to start my own business. What is that business going to be? It's going to be the technology that's everybody's claiming is going obsolete. But you know, it really speaks to like his personal passion and then the belief and in that. And you know, that's how we've built a staff. We've built a staff of people that share that personal passion. And then I think over the years, I think people, it's like as much as anything, people, it's drawn in a customer base that recognizes that, wants to, you know, experience that, or wants to experience someone else that gets that about them. And it's just been a lot of hard work and just careful planning and just building it up a little bit at a time. And then suddenly film has a renaissance, and it's like, here we are. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if we have enough time to really explain.
No, that's okay. Well, I think in summary, you were fortunate to have a visionary owner, right? That probably was maybe a step ahead of things, whereas you didn't have that old, this is how we used to do things and we're not going to change. I remember that there was a camera store in Munster, Indiana near me that went out of business around like 2014, 2015. And I remember going in that store one of the last days it was open, and the owner had posted kind of a nasty sign on the door, like, because you all don't take pictures anymore and, you know, look at your pictures online, we can no longer stay in business. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it clearly rung to me like a guy who didn't understand that change was necessary and he couldn't adapt. But I think the theme that both you guys have said is being able to embrace new ways of doing stuff and seeing things that were done. I certainly UsedPhotoPro, opening that in 2011, opened up your market too, because being able to reach people in different segments, I think, is critical today. Whereas, you know, in the past, it might have just been fine for have people walking by your store and stepping in. That, you know, that just doesn't work anymore.
I think a big factor in us being able to get through those early years was just being located in Portland. I think there's a lot of other places Jake could have started Blue Moon Camera and it wouldn't have worked out. But I think Portland has a community that I think was well suited to supporting an analog camera store.
I would agree. And, you know, Hong commented that Central is right next to the Art Institute in an area with a lot of people who love mechanical stuff and they love analog. I think location is a big part of it too. I remember, Zeb, reading a story about 8 or 9 years ago that involved Blue Moon, where some hikers had found buried in the mud an old Exacta camera. And I remembered reading about it. And I believe it was your store that restored it. Is that something you remember?
I don't know if we ever saw that camera. We may or may not have seen the film, and I can't remember if it was us or if it was Film Rescue International. But yeah, that camera was found out in the gorge, the Columbia River Gorge. Sorry.
I was just curious if there was an interesting story there. So
not that particular one. We had a camera. If you'll permit me a quick interesting story, we did have a camera. Gosh, what was it? I want to say it was an Argus C3, the brick, right? That somebody found in like a Goodwill or a thrift store. It had a roll of film in it. They brought us the roll of film. We processed it. It had photos of the Mount St. Helens eruption from 1980. And then the last couple shots on the roll were pictures of a family from the town of St. Helens, Oregon. And that film, that whole story got picked up by the local news. And then I think the state news. And they showed the picture of that family, and relatives of that family saw the news story and identified the people, and it turned out to be their grandmother's camera, and she passed and her stuff had gotten cleaned out, and that camera had ended up in a thrift store, and they were able to get the camera back to the family along with the film and the photos.
That's a wonderful story.
One of the things that I'm sure Zeb and Corey and Meredith, I think, and probably AJ will agree, one of the coolest things about working in a camera store is that you do something different every day, and you see the most interesting people. You'll see things from people coming in to buy their first camera to, I know Roberts and UsedPhotoPro were dominant in the news, the photojournalist market for a number of years. I mean, they were the go-tos. Well, I retired in 2010, so I've been out of it for 15 years. But prior to my retirement, that's what we did in this part of Ohio. When we retired, everyone went to Roberts. So it was really an interesting mix of things that you get to do and that you got to do. My store was interesting because I was right at the end of the runway at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We did a lot of odd things, like somebody would come in and say, we need a camera that can be operated with one hand while a person is wearing gloves, and they have to be able to look to their left. And what do you do? What can fill? And that's all they could tell you. They couldn't tell you, well, this guy's going to be in an airplane. He's going to be flying out of South Korea. He's going to lure the Chinese into coming up to chase him, and he's going to take a picture of him, which is what it turns out they were doing. But they couldn't really tell you that. A lot of it was problem solving. So there was all kinds of cool stuff, and I'm sure you got that with the photojournalist market.
We still sell to, a lot of wonderful, newspapers and magazines, and obviously their, how they buy has changed quite a bit, and they don't have the staff that they used to. So much of that is freelance or through AP now, but yeah, we've been fortunate to work with everybody from, the Washington Post, LA Times, Sports Illustrated, ESPN. We got lucky early on where the Pan Am games happened to be in Indianapolis, and I want to say maybe 1984. And we had two photographers from Sports Illustrated that I want to say stumbled in the store. They were looking for something very, obscure that they needed. We had it and were able to help them out. And one of the people that had come in, where it was like, ended up being one of the head purchasing people for Sports Illustrated. And just that chance, them coming in the store and us taking care of them that day, they're still a customer of ours. And that was 84.
Well, that's a cool part. You develop these clients and customers who become your friends.
Yeah.
And it's just a relationship that keeps giving and giving. And that's so important.
Yeah.
In the photojournalist market, what happened was when they started eliminating PJ jobs, they started buying small cameras for the reporters. So the reporters then became the photographers. There were more reporters than there were photographers, so you sold little cameras for them. And it's a self-propagating type thing where you're always getting new customers out of your old customers.
Yeah.
And if you take care of them, they'll keep coming back forever.
We have a number of Canadians here. Howard asked a question that Stephen had commented on in the chat, but this is for either Zeb or Meredith or Corey, do you guys get a lot of customers from Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we do. A lot of our UsedPhotoPro business is done on eBay. So we get a lot through the eBay platform. It's all centralized through a international forwarding company, so it's hard to identify exactly where it's always going. But we do have a good portion of Canadian customers.
And we do a buying show.
Yeah, we do Don's Photo. We just did a buying show a couple of weeks ago at Don's.
As a Canadian, I've purchased from UsedPhotoPro, and actually multiple times from your eBay store. And I think that's the only time I've bought more than one thing from the same eBay seller, just because your shipping prices are reasonable to Canada. So it's worked out beautifully for me.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
I was wondering, I think, where is that question? Was that Howard?
Yep.
Yeah, did you want to ask them about the question about the mail order, if they have experience with that?
Wondering more back in the day in the 70s, like when we used to get Popular Photography and look at all the ads and the great prices at the back from usually the New York-based big photo stores, some of which are still there, but I don't know if Abe's of Maine, they always had these incredible prices and whatnot.
Yeah, they're still there.
They were incredible for a reason, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Did people buy by mail back in the day? Did they go, we had a few big retail camera chains, Henry's had about 10 stores in Ontario. They're still around. There was another one called Toronto Camera, was a big store in Toronto. Wasn't a chain though. And it was a question of buying retail there, or you could get mail order from the US.
Our mail order business started primarily with businesses, and like there's a lot of the newspapers, schools, but as we got more comfortable with that part of the business, we were able to open it up to more consumer base. So it definitely, I think in those days, was probably more heavy businesses that we were working with mail order, but doing that early on helped us significantly transition to an internet e-commerce type of setup, because we were already set up pretty decently for shipping. It was something that we had done early on and had the staff in place, and so when the internet and that became the way of the world and the way of doing business, I felt like we were able to transition to that a little bit easier, than other stores that maybe weren't doing that type of mail order early on.
Well, in your case, the thing that you have going for you is your reputation, your descriptions on your used equipment, especially on eBay. eBay is the only place I see it, and I bought a number of things from you. Your descriptions are perfect. I mean, they are absolutely what you describe is what you're going to get. Now, one of your competitors, who I'm sure you're aware of who I'm talking about, when the original owner of the store sold out and changed over, it became really inconsistent as far as the descriptions, the rating of the equipment. A lot of things didn't work properly when it was done, and they've suffered because of that. So, I mean, what you have, you're trading on your good name, and you have the good name at this point. As far as used equipment in the U.S., I think you're probably number one. I don't really know much about MPB. Is it MPB?
They are a European-based company that moved into the Brooklyn area about 5 years ago.
That's kind of when we saw them, yeah.
And they do a good job as far as getting their name out there. They have a very efficient, automated online service. They have a lot of options, but I don't really know anything about them as a company.
As a customer of theirs, I would say they focus more on much newer digital stuff than classic stuff that we love.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, we've spoken a lot about you selling, but you have a good amount of inventory of old cameras. Where are you getting them from? Are you guys trawling Facebook Marketplace and estate sales like we are?
To a lesser extent, yes. No, we have a lot of great partnerships across the country and, into Canada and other countries, where we team up with stores and we do a cash for cameras types events where the draw for the store is, hey, we are partnering with your vendors. Customers will come in, we will purchase their goods and hopefully lean them towards a store credit or something that they can use to spend the money right back in the store. And it's a good opportunity and a good draw for the store to use our mailing list and our customer base in different regions across the country. We also have quite a bit of mail-in trades that come through our website. So we get a good amount of traffic just through the mail. And then we obviously have our one retail store in Indianapolis that draws a lot of people in as well.
So can somebody just walk into the retail store with a box of cameras and say, hey, are you interested in any of this?
Happens every day.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm not going to do that.
I'll
buy though.
Let me ask you something, Corey. Were you aware of the Burgess auction that was going on in Carmel?
I did see an estate. That's actually where we live.
Okay. There was an auction that just is closed, and it's what I've been looking over to the side here because I was bidding on a few things. Anthony knew the person who own the equipment. And I don't buy at auctions. I mean, I've never bought anything at an auction I didn't overpay for. So I stay away from auctions. I just buy from large lots of stuff. Having said that, I bought the Context kit, the S2 kit, and a 50 Sumerit from these guys. So I may go over to Carmel tomorrow.
Let us know.
Yeah, stop by the store. But no, we don't do a lot of auction buying for that exact reason. It's difficult to purchase it and then resell it and make any money.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, if you go visit them, maybe you could record yourself, trying to walk in and I'm from the Camerosity Podcast. Let me in.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, that just ended. Actually, what, an hour ago? Not even half hour ago?
My 3 pieces ended about a half hour ago.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for him to send me an invoice.
Zeb, would you say yours is about the same way? Like, is that how you get your inventory?
A lot of our inventory comes into the store. Yeah. Like, we're different in the sense that almost all of our inventory is consignment based. So we're consigning equipment, and that started just from the early days of the business where we just didn't have a lot of disposable income to be buying equipment. But also, like, we just kind of like the notion of selling on consignment, because then when you're working on a consignment basis, you're working with the owner of the equipment and you're both trying to get the best possible reasonable price for something, as opposed to you're trying to negotiate someone down to the lowest price you can get out of them. But yeah, a lot of our inventory is locally sourced and comes to us. We've been trying to expand that a bit more and develop our website a bit more to encourage more coming in from a national basis. And we're seeing improvement in that. We got a lot of improvement still left to accomplish there, but yeah, a lot of it just comes to us.
Do you do any rentals?
We want to so bad. We just think it'd be so cool to have a rental department that had a Graflex Crown Graphic and a Hasselblad and a Wide Lux and a Contax G2. And we've just never been able to get that off the ground and going. But we think that'd be like having a rental department where somebody could rent a 4x5 camera or a medium format, or a Leica, or even not a Leica, even a K1000.
I think in order for that to work, you definitely need the right neighborhood, and it seems to me like Portland's would be able to pull that off, but I suppose keeping the equipment running would be very difficult.
It would be expensive to maintain. Yeah,
sure. I mean, I could tell you so many stories for my website, I'll shoot usually only 1 or 2 rolls in a camera before I review it, and there's many instances where it doesn't even survive a single roll. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you should CLA any camera you get, if you want it to be dependable, but that's just not practical for everything. There, you even spoke, Corey and Meredith, about getting Leicas repaired. It's just getting to be expensive, and there are a few people who will do it affordably, but usually they're limited in their capacity. They can't handle a large volume from a store, so maybe you might be able to get one M3 done at a reasonable price, but that's just one. So going back to some of the questions that we were talking about earlier, like transitioning to new markets, where do you see the photography, film, or even vintage digital market going from here? Is it continuing to grow? Because the Kickstarter campaigns would want you to believe that it's continuing to expand, right? We're hearing more about different types of film emulsions. Like, I just played with something called Santa Color 100, which is just Kodak Aerocolor rebadged. And then you hear about Kodak saying they're no longer going to sell motion picture film to resellers. So then it's like, well, maybe it's not going to be popular. And then Fuji doesn't make anything new. But then we just heard about, who was it, Paul, that's going to experiment with making, or Steven, who was it, Steven, that's going to start trying to make pull apart film again?
I think it's the company in China. That's actually
Lens Labs.
Yes, that's the one.
Lens Labs. Yeah, they want to bring back peel apart instant film. So I guess the question I have is, I'm confused. Is the film market growing or is it shrinking?
Both.
Well, that helps a lot.
Sure, yeah, clear as
Well,
mud.
I mean, I think it's like, gosh, it's like, I think it is both. It's like, as Mike mentioned, it's like, it's hard to get anything out of Fuji these days that isn't Instax. We beat up our rep every couple of weeks to get more slide film out of Provia or Velvia, just our kingdom for a roll of Velvia. And it just never happens. And then you have other companies like Harman, like actively working on, like, they got Phoenix and they Red, which is just Phoenix reversed, but they're implying that Phoenix is just the first step to other color emulsions. And so, yeah, it's like there have been retreats and advances. We lose films like Kodak Ultra Color and NC and VC Portra, and we just get one Portra. But then we lose Plus X, but we still have Tri-X, and then we get gold in 120. And so, yeah, it's been a mix.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an exciting year, I think. I mean, we definitely see the growth on our end, both on the retail side and the distribution side. I mean, I think you have exactly what Zeb was saying. You have a company like Harman Technology, which makes Ilford black and white film. You've seen Harman make a huge investment into coming out with a color film, which I think is the first like actual new emulsion in decades. You have Pentax, which decided to come out with the Pentax 1.7 half frame film camera. You had Mint making a new Rollei camera. So, I mean, there's definitely, I think there's growth, and I think there's interest in this market that you're going to see continue. It might not grow, to Zeb's point, it might not grow at the rate that it has grown over the last 5 years. And you might even get to a point where it's going to plateau a little bit. But I think the investment you're seeing on the manufacturer side and, the hopefully continued interest from this younger market that likes to shoot film because they were never exposed to it, no pun intended. They just never grew up with it. So they want to try it out. I think that's going to be a good mix going forward. And like I said, maybe not the, double-digit growth it's seen coming out of COVID, but I'm very confident in the future of it.
What was interesting today, the rumors hit the internet that Leica had announced an ASA 50 black and white film. So we'll see if that actually happens. I think that's cool because can anyone else remember any other camera manufacturer besides Kodak and Fuji that came out with a film?
Rollei had some.
Rollei, yes, and Agfa, of course. For Leica to come out with an ASA 50 just seemed a little strange, but I suppose they had some local source for it that had the film, so they decided to come out with it.
I love slow speed black and white. Everyone here knows, or most people should know, my favorite black and white film of all time is Kodak Penatomic X. And I would love to see something like that come back. I love slow, incredibly tiny grain. I love the shadow detail of Panax. I'm not a big fan of high contrast films. I mentioned that Santa color that I just did, and I knew it had muted colors. I knew what to expect. Yet, even after looking at the images, I was just underwhelmed with them.
Interesting enough, Mike, I've literally got Penatomic X in my M2 at the moment that you sent me.
Thank God.
So...
when you said in my, I was like, which camera is it going to be? But M2, okay, great. Is that the first time you've shot Panax?
No, I used it in my Vitessa a couple of times already, and that's a good pairing as well.
Yeah, it really is. I love cameras because when you shoot slower black and white films, you obviously want to not have super slow shutter speed, so you counter it with better light. And I just love going out on like a nice warm summer day, or even in the winter. I mean, honestly, Pan X is awesome for snowscapes because it doesn't have that ridiculously high contrast like a Rollei APX. Yeah, the Rollei RPX 25 does. It shows just the reflection of light so well, and there's so much detail in it that it's one of my favorite films for just walking about outside.
It's especially good here in Sydney because even here in winter now, yes, it's a little bit colder and we've got a jumper on and so on, but it doesn't, we don't get the snow. We don't get, we get bright blue sky days with, a couple of
Yeah.
clouds, but the sun is so angled that you get that really soft light coming through. And films like that are just beautiful for that because you've got the long shadows and you've got that clear definition between, what's being lit up and what's actually falling into the shadow.
Does anybody, we have Shane from Discord. Welcome to the show, Shane. A little while ago, somebody named PJ joined. Don't know who that is, but do you guys have any questions for us, for Blue Moon, for Roberts? Hey, Shane.
Hello. First time, I guess. No questions particularly. Not that I can think of at the moment. I do use Roberts occasionally, every once in a while when the good Nikon deals come through.
One of the things that I bought a lot from you guys, you don't do it so much anymore, but you used to do a lot of vintage camera lots that were all untested cameras. And I remembered that was one of my eBay saved searches was vintage camera lot in your store. And I've gotten a lot of really cool stuff because I got you guys posted just enough good pictures that I could figure out what was in the background, but you also didn't describe it so that people looking for those models maybe missed it. So I was able to kind of get it for a pretty good price and maybe get a lot of like 8 or 9 cameras. And I only really wanted 1 or 2. So that was one of my early, very common purchases that I had from you guys, which I very much appreciate.
Well, I'll back up for you, Mike. We'll get this going.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. I like have this fantasy that like somewhere there's this room of like just piles and piles of old cameras that you guys haven't gotten to yet. So
it's there.
Oh, is it? Oh my gosh. Paul, go there tomorrow and let me know.
What we really need to do is raid Mike's house, grab his cameras, and then sell them back to him and see if he notices.
Yeah, that probably would work.
One of my coworkers' father owned a store in a kind of rural town in Tennessee, and he'd passed away years ago, and he did repairs, and she asked me to go through all of the repairs that were never picked up. They were probably, I would say, 100 cameras. Most of them weren't picked up because they couldn't be repaired, but there were a few gems in that pile.
There used to be a place in one of the northwest Chicago suburbs called Lee's Camera Repair, and it went out of business. And I remembered going there, and they had a whole bunch of cameras like that were previously repaired, and the owners just never picked them up. And I was able to pick up a couple really cool cameras for real cheap. So if you have that option, that can be convenient.
Mike, I would like for no offense to Zeb or Meredith, I'd like folks to give a shout out to a local camera store in their area. That's
a great idea.
Actually, down the road, and I'll start with the F32 in East Tennessee in Knoxville. In fact, I went there to get this XT50, and they said they couldn't have one, and he recommended me that I go to Roberts. So,
Scott or April that helped you?
It was Scott. Yeah,
Scott's great.
Yeah, it was Scott, and April does all my processing and all my scanning. And I'm in there once a week. It's just like the good old days when you could just go down the road to a camera store. They have a rack full of old cameras that I hang around, and they are also selling brand new stuff. And they're processing film, and they'll print your photos on a coffee mug. They are a full service camera store right here in Knoxville. So shout out to F32.
They're wonderful people.
Wonderful people.
Yeah,
that's a good idea. Does anybody else have any recommendations for their store that's near them?
Actually, I do. I'm up in Massachusetts. I'm in the Northeast. There's this place in Vermont called Vermont Center of Photography. It's a little place where people get together, but they have this store inside called Photo Thrift where people just donate their stuff and they sell it off for the profits to build up the store again. And it's actually where I got this little dude. It's a Nicomat, but it's an FS model, so it's missing a lot of features from the normal model.
Right. It has no meter.
No meter, no mirror lockup.
Relatively rare.
Yeah, 20,000 in 2 years, I believe they built. But people are there so nice. They're so helpful. Great people to talk to and learn from. Up in Brattleboro, I'd say go check it out if you're in the area.
Very cool.
Here in Columbus, Ohio, we're lucky to have 2 stores. We have Midwest Photo Exchange and World of Photography.
Both great stores.
Yeah.
Are they vintage and new, or like what do they specialize in?
Yeah, both have a good used presence. as well as new stock.
In Ottawa, Canada, here we have the chain store Henry's. There's another one called Vistec. They mainly sell, it's pretty much all digital stuff these days. Vistec also rents, but I think it's only digital. Maybe they have Hasselblad film cameras for rent. But for film, there's a very small shop run by a fellow who used to deal in used cameras at the former Camera Exchange, and his store is called Galaxy Camera. And he's got cameras, he's got film and chemicals, and he's got every kind of film. Like, it's amazing what he gets in. And so shout out to Galaxy Camera in Ottawa.
I think AJ may know a particular store that's really very close to him. I mean, I think we need to hear from him on this one.
Hey, Theo. You're talking about where I work?
Yes.
I happen to be the principal photography instructor for the largest chain here in Quebec. We have 5 stores, one in Quebec City, one in Three Rivers. We have one in Laval. Then we opened up on the South Shore with the Distraunt, and we have actually 2020, the year of the pandemic, we opened up in Montreal, and Montreal is running really strong right now. We have a full-fledged lab. We develop 120 and 135 C41 at our Laval location, and 120 I believe is at our Montreal location. And then we send out the black and white stuff. I'm in the process. I'm launching a brand new class, a weekend workshop on film. Shoot the Saturday morning, develop in class on the Saturday afternoon, digitize the Sunday morning, and ready to print everything on the Sunday afternoon. So here in Montreal, I'll tell you straight out, its film is really taken a good. Actually, here in Quebec, we have a group here in Montreal I would say over 500 people. You guys probably know it as Beers and Cameras in the States. We have a Bière et Camera Montréal. And about a month and a half ago, we started one in Quebec City, a group in Quebec City. I'm not sure yet how many people are down there. But film has taken a big stand here in Montreal.
So, and what's the name of the stores?
Gosselin Photo Video. Actually, we're kind of that style department store, camera store. But we have stuck with the tradition of a camera shop, in that you come in, you look at the cameras, you get to try them out. On the digitals, evidently we have more stuff on digital, but we have a pretty good. Actually, Mike. We had a weekend of our, I believe Corey was talking about it earlier, twice a year. Traditionally, we have a weekend where we buy all vintage stuff, and I got a couple new, and I'm so glad that we have also that Zed's out there, because I just opened a web account with you, because I just got myself my father's day gift.
Is that an LX?
That's the Minex B.
Oh, okay, B.
And I actually the gentleman who sold it to us, he had a roll. This is 1967. I don't know how good it is, but apparently there's 2 rolls in here of 50 exposure. So I'm eager to see what that's going to be like. But I now know where to get my Minex B film from.
Very cool.
AJ, I saw a video about your guys' store one time at a conference, and it was I don't know which location they were featuring, but it's one of the most beautiful retail stores I've ever seen. I was blown away.
Thank you so much. As a matter of fact, the one in the Discount did win an award. I'm not sure with what contest, but it was a retailer floor plan or whatever. Most of our large, which is Laval and Discount, we have 2 classrooms that can fit up to comfortably 12 people. We take the tables out when we do conferences and stuff like that, you're looking at about probably around 25 people. I'm proud of the store. I opened up the lab. I was lucky because I opened up the lab. I used to be manager of the lab in Laval, but when we opened up the South Shore, because I'm from the South Shore, I was one of the ones that opened up the lab here on the South Shore, and I helped open the lab in Montreal.
That's fantastic.
Oh yeah,
it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Very cool. Hey, Miles, Do you have a camera store maybe in Portland you'd like to recommend?
Yes. We're actually pretty fortunate in Portland. Not only do we have Blue Moon, but we also have Camera Solutions in Southwest Portland. And we have Advanced Camera, which mostly does repair, and they're in Beaverton, which is kind of a very nearby suburb. Zeb, I don't know, what's the name of the camera store downtown?
Don't forget Citizens.
Citizens.
And Pro Photo Supply.
And Pro Photo, yeah.
And Pro Photo. So considering
Citizens these days is almost all processing. They have some stuff in there, but I was talking to one of them. They just don't have the people to sell the merchandise they have, so they're focusing on the. So they've got some tasty stuff in there, but I wish they'd think about selling it.
Yeah, they gotten rid of a lot of their inventory and focus more on the processing services. I used to love going in there and browsing through their cases and talking to Jim. But yeah, it's almost all processing now. But they, that's their bread and butter.
I have a question for both Roberts and Blue Moon. My understanding is that I know both of you do film processing. My understanding is that the machines to process or to scan them were made 15, 20, 30 years ago. And I'm curious, what's the maintenance and repair look like for those machines? How easy is it to get repaired? How often do they break down? Yeah, what does that look like in 2025?
Deb, you should start. You guys do developing to a whole different level than we do.
So first off, I guess, Miles, you don't have to worry about not being able to get film processed anytime soon. And that's not going to be an issue. A lot of, both Fuji and Noritsu have pretty modern production level film scanners. And while I don't think Noritsu is producing and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, while I don't think they're producing their film scanners brand new anymore, they were up to a few years ago because that's where we got our first Noritsu film scanner, and they still offer support. At the other end of the spectrum, like I said, 20 years ago, we opened Blue Moon with a printing machine that was already 20 years old and while it's been a challenge to keep that machine up and running, we have, it's just, we've learned to scour the market and source parts machines. In some cases, we've had to fabricate parts, and 3D printing can help a lot with that. But there's enough machines out there on the market, especially when you consider the global nature of the market, that continuing to source processing machines or parts for them, I don't think is going to be an existential issue anytime soon.
Along the lines of, people investing in the industry, there is a new developer out from a line called Calenta. And those are brand new machines. They're being made in Austria, color, black and white. But yeah, the Noritsus, things definitely need repair and go down. I always joke that if I walk in one day and ask how the lab's doing and they tell me everything's going great, I'll go buy a lottery ticket. Because there's always something, but it's a manual, chemical process. So there's a lot of things that can happen. But yeah, to Zeb's point, we've 3D printed parts. We've ordered from places and people on eBay that,
are using mini lab type equipment like Noritsu or Fuji or Frontier or...
We have a Noritsu and a Calenta.
Okay. And those, there are so many of those on the market. There were so many of them made and sold that there are plenty of parts out there. And there are guys now who are refurbishing the processors. So there should be a parts supply for a long time. But like you say, you can always 3D print a roller, a gear or something if you need it.
We've gone through 3 different film processors at this point. We're currently using an FP363 for our C41. And the last couple of machines, what has forced us to move on was sourcing the chemistry to run the machines. The machine we had before the Fuji was a Konica, and it used a proprietary like tablet system, and then that chemistry stopped getting produced. And even like the Fuji uses a Fuji chemistry, I think it might even come from ketanol. And so as long as companies are producing the chemistry for these machines, I don't, at least for on the color side, black and white is so much simpler in terms of sourcing chemistry.
Is there a large amount of people that are still doing home development? Like, is that growing, or is it still kind of small compared to store processing?
So much more than it used to be even just a few years ago. I think the rising costs of film and chemistry, the rising costs of processing and buying film, I think and I mean, some people, of course, have shifted just because they want to do it themselves and enjoy it. Sure. But I think it's also like the greater cost efficiency of doing it home too. We're seeing so many more people setting up dark rooms. The pandemic, I think, kickstarted this sort of like the sourdough bread effect. People, that opportunity to set up a home dark room. And yeah, we sell so much chemistry, like the Cinestill kits and, the Ilford Simplicity kits to people that are, processing at home.
I'm really excited because this past week I got my ADOX new Syrup 110. They can't call it HC 110, but this is supposedly closer to the original Kodak HC 110 formula. So I haven't opened the bottle yet, but I've been waiting to get this because it's been available in Europe for quite some time, but you couldn't get it here in the US. But I literally just got this like 4 or 5 days ago. So
where'd you get it from?
Freestyle.
Okay.
They were stocking it for, I think, $28 a bottle, which is way cheaper than what Kodak's selling. I heard some story that Kodak actually lost the trademark to their own product, so even they can't call it HC110 anymore. So that's my favorite black and white developer. I know there's so many other great options, but the problem with this stuff is that it works so well, I had never needed to learn some other way.
Well, I'm 62 years old, and I've been shooting film for more than 50 years, and still the idea of processing color film scares the hell out of me. I don't know why. I feel like I'll pour two things in and there'll be an explosion.
The one thing I tell people regarding C41, here's my tip, Larry, is the thing to me that's more intimidating about black and white is that there's like 10, 12 different developers. There's the massive dev chart. There's stand development. There's agitation development. You can push, pull. I feel like with black and white, while yes, it can be easy, you can very easily overcomplicate it too. And then you'll hear guys like Alex Loix who will do a review of a developer and say, even finer grain with this developer. And then you start having FOMO. And I feel like with black and white, it's a wormhole. With C41, there's only one way to do it. Yes, you can push. Yes, you can pull. But really, when you get those powder kits, I really like the Unicolor kits, but Cine still has their kits too. It does not matter whether you have Kodak, Fuji, expired film, fresh film, 120, 35 millimeter. As long as you have a thermometer and you could reasonably read it and follow instructions, I like C41 because there's only one way to do it. Every single time, I just did 9 rolls 2 days ago. Every single time I develop C41, it's the same steps. I've memorized each process and I get good results every time. Now, slide film is a different process altogether, but for you or anybody listening that's terrified of trying C41, it is not as complicated as people make it out to be. Yes, it is a little bit more precise for temps on the actual development stage, but just go to Amazon, get a meat thermometer, just one of the stick thermometers. And as long as you're within a degree or two, you've heard it from me. Don't listen to the people that tell you need to be 102.000 and a 0.3% variance in temperature is going to ruin anything. That's not true. You'll get results.
I have 3 thermometers. I have a sous vide. I look at it and I take it.
You don't need it.
I take it to F32.
Get some Patterson takes, get the powder Unicolor kit, go to the store and get 1 liter bottles of like club soda or tonic water. I like those because I like the plastic bottles, empty them out, rinse them out real good, mix your chemicals in them. And I like the plastic bottles because when you're done with them, you can squeeze the air out, put the cap back on, and it makes them airtight. I do all my development in the basement. So my basement rarely gets above 65, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know the Celsius version of that. The point being is like it keeps it cool. You can reuse C41 chemicals easily 20 rolls. You do start to get weird color shifts after that, but if that's the kind of thing you like, you could easily push the same kit 30, 40 rolls if you want to go crazy.
The only caveat I would add, it's easy, it is smelly, and it should be very well ventilated when you mix up the powder for the unicolor kits, because it's kind of like horseradish. Like you really gotta. I'm kind of pouring it at an angle and not being above it where the fumes rise. But other than that, it's really not bad.
What I want to say here too, though, is don't get bullied into thinking you have to process your own film. I mean, there is option. I personally have made a decision to get mine, and luckily I've got a pro lab nearby, so I like the consistent results. I like the fact that it's done for me, and you can evaluate what your time is worth compared to what it costs. And at the same time, you start to support the camera stores, the labs that are actually doing it and keeping this industry afloat. So while there's a lot of people that say, yeah, you should, it's easy, and that it is easy. You can process your own film. It's not hard, but you may just not want to. You may actually just want a lab to do it for you.
No, I support what Theo's saying too. I mean, you will get more consistent results by paying a professional to do it. But my comment was targeted towards a person who feels very comfortable doing black and white,
That's right.
but has this fear of doing color. And I don't think you need to have that fear.
Yeah, I actually, being that professional lab, right? I agree with both Mike and Theo. And usually what I tell customers is like C41, it isn't hard to do. It really isn't. It is just maybe hard to do really, really well. And the big thing really just does come down to temperature management, since C41 runs hotter and requires a bit more effort to maintain that. You just have to be more mindful. It's like, the Cinesil sous vide, or the really low tech, just a thermometer. Both of those are good solutions. So if you just manage your temperature well. Coming from the lab perspective, it's like, I know that like one of the big things that it's like we run a replenishment based system, and those give a really big advantage to the fact that you can season a batch of chemistry and get it in really good balance, and then maintain that balance through constant turnover. And like we start every day in our lab by processing control strips, and we're reading those on a densitometer to check the activity of like the low development versus the high development and the D-min. It's like, and so it's like, and that sort of speaks to what like Theo says, is that, I think the big, the two big things that a pro lab offers, one of them, of course, is the convenience factor where, it's like you don't have to do it yourself. The other is that consistency. And you can easily introduce inconsistencies, especially in terms of like color, with at-home C41. But I will circle back around and say it is totally doable. If you can process black and white film, you can totally process C41. You can even process E6. It's like, as long as you're willing to maybe embrace, certain inconsistencies, it's like these things can be done at home.
So I have a question for you lab people. How do you folks do black and white? I mean, Tri-X wants one period, one time, T-Max wants. Do you do it all together? Is there a magic developer that does everything, or do you do it separately?
So you can do it all together, and some labs do. Some labs will run all black and white film in one developer at one time, and then you'll get varying results based on the film types. We batch by time, and so it's like we sort out all of our black and white films, and so like all the films that have the same processing times go into one bucket, and maybe that's a 5-minute processing time, and all the ones that have a 5.5, and all the ones that have a 6-minute, they just get sorted and run in batches like that.
Is most of your stuff C41, or do you have more black and white and E6 than a person might guess?
It's probably two-thirds C41, one-third black and white. And then I know that's 100%, but add in another 10% to 15% E6.
And do you still mount 35 millimeter, or do you just, here's the film, do with it what you will?
We wish we could, but we can't get the mounts anymore. And we mounted slides right up until we have a really sort of medieval looking air powered mounting machine that it's both cool and terrifying. But yeah, like Geppy, I think it was Geppy, they were the last ones producing the slide mounts. We were getting them through a company called Paycor, at least in terms of like slide mounts on the level that we needed them. It's like, yeah, you can still go on eBay and find the odd box of slide mounts, but unfortunately, they just don't make slide mounts anymore.
I think there's still AP still make a couple. I mean, they're not made for machines. They're one of those that open up like a clam, but you can still get those new at the moment. I think they're called AP from Europe. I'm not sure what they're called in North America, but they're pretty handy, and they work with a little slide mounting machine that you buy at home with a little light under it, and you just sort of rotate and slice and close and rotate, slice and close, and that's pretty handy. So if you want to shoot slides, you can still get those. But to Zeb's point, I don't think no one makes slide mounts for machines now that process high volumes.
Yeah.
And would you say for Roberts, it's about the same as what Zeb was saying?
Yeah, in terms of the quantities that we definitely do much more C41 than black and white. And we do not have a black and white developer. So our staff hand develops our black and white. So our turnaround times are a little bit longer for that. But yeah, we're definitely heavier C41.
Do your C41 customers mainly want it scanned? Or I know that Blue Moon prints. Do you guys, at Roberts, do you guys print C41 as well, or is it mostly all scanned?
We definitely can print, and we do definitely have customers that will get prints, but the majority of our C41, they're getting it scanned and the scans are emailed to them. And it's such a push to even get people to come back and pick up their negatives.
Yeah, I remember I've heard that people will actually go throw the negatives away because I got the scan now. Oh.
Yeah.
Here in Montreal, let me tell you, that is the most heart-wrenching thing.
Yes.
I see at my service counter is the young people, because they just want it for the vintage look.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand that technically a negative will last a lifetime and more, because you can look at it through light 100 years from now.
Yep.
Right? And I try to explain it to these people that, guys, that island that the young generation, they're so recycling and all that island of plastic in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you're contributing to it when you ask the counter to destroy your film.
We could all commiserate on that, I think. It's like the negatives are irreplaceable. You want those.
That's the picture.
One of the things that so many stores comment on is that now you've got people going into the store once to drop off a roll, as opposed to they would drop off a roll and they'd come back for a second visit to pick up the prints. So you'd get two visits out of people where you could sell them more film, batteries, cameras. They could look at tripods and bags. And, in the early days of digital, I worked at a camera store that during that transition, when people started getting digital cameras, they went from coming in twice for their film to coming in not at all, because they weren't making prints from digital, and that market sort of disappeared. And I was talking to the owner who had been doing this for a very long time about, now nobody's coming in to develop film and get prints anymore. What are we going to do? And he told me that he remembers when they used to sell flash bulbs at Christmas time. They'd get a whole pallet of flash bulbs and sell thousands of those, and that would bring people in and be sustaining revenue. So it's kind of, things have always been changing, and it's always been a matter of adapting to market conditions.
And I think that that's one of the fascinating things about the photo industry is I can't think of another shift in technology that more significantly affected a whole industry, such as going from film to digital. Basically, the pre-digital days, there were the flash bulbs, there were the negatives, there were the recurring film, the printing, the accessories, even repairing cameras. You'd buy a camera, you'd buy a Leica, and it was expected every couple of years you'd bring it back to the store for maintenance. And just the amount of times the same customer would visit their local store, and then when digital came out, it was all gone. You know, I mean, there have certainly been changes in the TV industry and in the automobile industry and whatnot, but I don't think there's been such a seismic shift as there was for this. And for there to be places like Roberts who survived and Blue Moon who was created at a time of the beginning of that shift, and you see some of these stores like Central who've been able to stay open and adapt, that's just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, it seems like it took 100 years to go from horses to cars, but it took like 3 weeks to go from film to digital.
It was fast.
Meredith, how big a part of photo finishing was your business prior to digital?
That's a great question. And to be honest, I do not have an answer to that. That would have been before my time there, when it really in the heyday of photo finishing. I mean, we've always obviously done it, but I don't know, I know we had the Kodak mini labs and it was a big piece. We always focused a little bit more on the equipment side. I mean, I think Indianapolis had a lot of labs, a lot of 1 hour photo places. You had, Ford Camera had a big presence in our market. So I don't know if we ever were in it as heavy as like a Ritz or a Wolf or a Cord or those guys, but I wouldn't have an exact number.
The reason I ask is that's good because you weren't relying on those dollars.
Yeah.
We were actually the same way. We didn't have a mini lab. We had a Kodak creation station. We had a Fuji Pictrostat. So we could make prints from prints. We could make prints from negatives. We could make prints from slides, but we couldn't develop film. It was a cash cow. I mean,
Yep.
Processing was extremely profitable. It saved a lot of stores because they weren't selling the equipment, but they were doing the photo finishing. So when digital came along, all of a sudden that business went away. It wasn't just the film sales, it was the processing. So the stores that relied on photo finishing to keep their doors open no longer had that coming in.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen pretty fast. I mean, it was only a matter of a couple of years that it really took off.
Yeah. I believe it. It was fast and the digital doesn't have a lot of margin in it. All the margin was in the services side of it. So it would have been a big adjustment.
The store that I worked at did photo finishing for consumers, but a lot was for local businesses. There were orthodontists, there were professional portrait studios, there was the police and hospitals were getting Polaroid film, but there were so many corporate clients that were padding out that photo finishing. Although we're seeing a rise in the enthusiast market, the everyday home family snapshot customer is not coming back, and those businesses are not coming back. So I think that must be a big adjustment. And maybe like with Zeb, did you think that you kind of got that enthusiast market at the start and that was what really built your business?
Yeah, I do agree with that, Stephen. Because even early on, we had a number of like E6 customers that were orthodontists and so many slides of teeth. But that wasn't a big part of it, even from the beginning. And so it really has, like, the services really have been enthusiasts. Like our darkroom, because we run a full black and white printing darkroom as well. And I feel like a fair number of those customers were like professional photographers who were delivering like silver gelatin prints, like photographing clients and delivering them silver gelatin prints. That's waned off over the years, but yeah, we never grew up relying on like the corporate like clients in that, or just like the scientific or like the bigger clients like that.
I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We could talk here for hours and hours and hours, but I know that it's getting to be late for some people. But I wanted to go around and see if anybody had any last minute questions for Zeb, Meredith, or Corey.
I'll ask, what's the one camera you wish you could get unlimited supplies of for your used camera, for used photo or for Blue Moon?
Well, right now it'd be any point and shoot because I can't keep them on the shelves. It's kind of ridiculous. They're the right price point for the entry level person, and they're so hot, and they're selling for about 250 times what they should be selling for.
Now, does that apply point and shoot film and digital?
Yes, both. Whatever Taylor Swift touched last.
I'm going to borrow that answer as well and get more specific and say if they still made the Olympus Stylus Epic, like, and we could just order that. It's like it's such a perfect camera for what so many, it'd be a good, well, in theory, it'd be a good price point. It's simple, it's good quality. Like if, yeah, we could never get tired of selling Olympus stylus epics.
A couple episodes ago, Stephen was talking about how he sold those new, and there was a period of time where they couldn't sell them. They just sat there. And now it's the complete opposite.
I remember that time.
It's a good question, Larry. Anybody else?
How realistic is we'll get reasonable shipping to Australia from your stores?
It's
bad.
It's not terrible. If you purchase through our eBay store, they are able to control the rates a little bit better because of the freight forwarder that they use.
Good.
So, yeah, you should be able to see the rates through that.
Yeah, for us, like shipping rates is an ongoing project and one that we're always working on. And it is tough because being a smaller store, we run our shipping at basically no cost or no profit. But it's still expensive. In our case, it's like we're always trying to balance. So like, I don't know if you've shopped from us, but like all of our international is DHL, and that's just base. And DHL is expensive, but they're also fast and consistent, and there's hardly ever any other problems. And just over the years, it's like if you ship something other courier services and it gets hung up in customs or lost, it's like you have no control over that. But from the customer's point of view, it's always your problem. And that is a tough place to be in. And so that's why we've opted to, it's like, okay, it's like we'd rather have slightly higher shipping that is also more reliable for the customer. And yeah, it's always a push and pull. I wish we could be like Amazon and ship everything like within 6 hours for next to nothing, but it's just, yeah, it's an ongoing project.
Do you guys have any upcoming events, any like bring in your stuff and buy, or do you guys do any camera walks or anything that you're looking forward to doing this summer?
Yeah, I mean, on the Roberts side, we do our big tent sale in August. It's August 16th. So we do what's called our garage sale. So we bring out, I mean, just bins and bins of used camera equipment, and we do what's called a fill a box sale. So we have 2 size boxes, and it's
I'm gonna come.
One price.
I'll be there.
And then it's just everything you can fit in the box. So that's August 16th, and it's just, it's just a fun day. It's garage sale. We have vendors in, but we have a lot of, we try and have stuff going on every weekend, whether it's like a photo walk or a class or some type of event. The experience side and the education is very important to us. So we always try and have something going on, but the August thing's my favorite.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
Do you guys ever go to camera shows?
We do. Yeah, we usually, we'll go to several a year. Actually, in March, we went to the photography show in London, which was the first time we did that. And that was a really cool experience. But there's Imaging USA here. Build is this week. The B&H show is, I think, starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
So there's always some good trade shows here in the US as well.
Dan and Paul, when are the Ohio shows coming up in September?
September something, 12th, 13th, something like that.
Okay.
They did run one camera show in Indianapolis a couple of years ago, but I don't think it was attendance was good enough that they do another one.
Yeah, we did it, I think, 3 times. Yeah, we weren't getting a lot of draw there. The Columbus show, unfortunately, was just this past May 30th and 31st, and we won't be doing that again until next May. But we'd love to see people come there for the Ohio Camera Collector Society. We've been doing it every year since 1969.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we're the oldest continuously running camera collectors club and show in the U.S.
Paul and I and Anthony too, were at the Cincinnati show in March, and that was one of the best well-attended ones they've had in a while. So maybe one of these times Roberts will have a little table there. Wink, wink.
That's great to know about.
And there's a really nice Irish pub right across the street. We can grab some fermented adult beverages afterwards. Zeb, anything Blue Moon's got to promote?
Well, we just had our annual garage sale. People love a good garage sale when camera stuff's involved. We've been talking about expanding that to twice a year. So maybe we'll have another one coming up in the fall. It's a little farther down the road, but the time flies, it seems.
Oh, yeah.
But we have our big annual customer show coming up. It's always the first Saturday in December. And it's like a dual celebration. So like we started it in, I think, 2003 was the first year that we did it. And we've done it every year pretty much since then. It's like when you run a photo lab, you just see so much cool work, and like cool work in the sense of like work made by people trying to make cool work, and work made by people that weren't trying to make it but made it nonetheless. And it's like incidental art. And so like we started collecting, we collect prints all year long, and it's like not submission based, it's all curated by our lab, and the entire staff votes on a print when one of our printers nominates it. And if it gets a majority vote from the staff, we make a copy of the print. And then when the customer comes in to pick up their prints, we get them to give their permission, obviously, and sign it. And so like the show usually ends up being between 150 and 250 prints that we've rounded up all year long. And then we mount them and display them in all the local businesses in St. John. So we have like 3 or 4 different businesses that will stay open late for that night. And then the first Saturday in December, we have like a big brouhaha, and we have live music and drinks and snacks. And we'll like one venue will host the current year show, and then the other venues will host the previous year's shows from like the past 2 or 3 or 4 years. And so it's like 1,000 or more analog prints of, analog photos. And it's a really cool event. So like, if you're going to come out to Portland, do it the first Saturday in December. It'll be cold and rainy, but we'll be able to give you a good time.
That's amazing.
And I will say all of that stuff is on their website, and it is really cool. You can go back and see all of the last customer shows. I flipped through some of them this week. It's very cool.
It's a lot of fun. It's some neat stuff.
Today's the 16th, so we will record our next episode 95. We're going 3 weeks this time, so it's going to be Monday, July 7th. We don't yet have a topic yet. We don't know what we're going to talk about. We'll either come up with something or maybe do a gas episode. I wanted to thank Corey, Meredith, and Zeb for coming on the show. This has been wonderful. I'm sure there's many, many other topics, wacky customer stories we could have come into. The invitation to join this show is ongoing. So if you ever would like to come back and just engage into some camera geekery, you're absolutely welcome. The link that you use to join the show is the same one we use over and over again. So you could always hear about when the next show is going to be published, either through my site, mikeeckman.com. We post on the Camerosity Facebook page and on our Discord server. So we usually get those announcements out a couple of days beforehand. That's really all I have. So as always, the topics and discussions on the Camerosity podcast are determined, influenced, and controlled by you guys. So we like hearing from everybody who can come on the show. First-time callers are welcome. Don't feel like you have to have the collection size, knowledge, or experience that we do. We like people of all walks of life, category 1, 2, and 3 people, like I mentioned earlier. Thank you guys for coming, and everybody have a good rest of your week.
This was awesome. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
Guys, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Paul, I've got a question for you. You've mentioned Springfield a couple of times. Have you ever run into Homer Simpson?
Homer, actually, there is a business, there's a restaurant that has Homer on the side of it. I think it's a donut shop.
Lovely.
Now we have to pack for Great Uncle Tyrone's birthday tomorrow in Dayton, Ohio. It's got Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and a zipper museum. They have a zipper from every James Bond.